Content warning for self-harm, stigmatization and medical gaslighting.
Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome our Neuro clan in particular. As you may be aware by now, after watching some of our other videos, hopefully, October is Mental Health Awareness Month. And with that in mind, we decided to do a series of videos talking to community members about different aspects of neurodivergence and mental health neurodivergencies and how different mental health conditions impact them on their people on their neurodivergencies and how they interact as well. And so up until this point, Keir has been the interviewer and other people have been the interviewee. But today is a little bit different because today Keir is taking the role of interviewee. And obviously we're not going to pretend that we don't know who Keir is or anything like that. But you may not have heard Keir talking about the specific topic that they're going to talk about today. So Keir, would you like to give a bit of an introduction around that? And, you know, if you want to introduce yourself as well, just in case there's anybody out there that hasn't seen or heard you on our multiple videos and chats and meetups.
Yeah, so yes, Keir, multiply neurodivergent, but today what I would like to talk about is I have whatever borderline personality difference, or in Ireland in the HSC system it uses the ICD term of emotionally unstable personality disorder, but I reject that so much. I hate the idea of just like you're emotionally unstable, constantly emotionally unstable. Like borderline isn't great either, but I picked that
at least
over.
yeah, at least there's wiggle room there. But if you're just constantly emotionally unstable and just no stability at all, yeah, I can understand why that might, let's be honest, feel a bit on the nose, to be polite about it. So I suppose we will continue to refer to it as BPD because that's your preference, and that's, you know, let's not be dictated to by the medical professionals on this one. Obviously, people may have heard the term borderline personality difference. And obviously they may have seen, let's be honest, some pretty shocking and horrible representation on media and stuff like that. But what does it mean to you? What does the term mean to you? What's your understanding of it?
So I suppose like it really impacts people, like at its core, it impacts your ability to manage and identify your emotions, and tends to be like, obviously a lot of these things, it's like wide spectrum of stuff. And so for some people, some BPDers, it's the like numbness and not actually feeling anything whatsoever and not knowing how to identify emotions. And for other BPDers, it is swinging between emotions and feeling really heightened emotions a lot of time. And I think I've had a particularly interesting journey for personally from like within myself. I feel like it was interesting because I spent so many years being really numb, which might come as a shock to anybody that knows me now, because anybody that knows me now knows me as somebody who's like always either laughing or crying. And so but like 5-7 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to identify my emotions. I was either numb or extremely depressed. Like there was nothing else really. And even at that, the depression, it didn't feel like sadness. It was just emptiness. And I actually like feeling chronically empty is one of the other traits of BPD. But I suppose way my BPD sort of looks like now is, yeah, I do have a lot of emotions. I do ferry.
So is it kind of like a big ups and big downs kind of, or
bigs up, bigs down, but also very multiple times a day. Like what actually shocked me when I was like first got diagnosed with BPD and I started like exploring this whole concept was finding out that most people are just at neutral and don't actually experience any emotion for the majority. And then like you have your happiness, but for the most part, you're just content. You're neutral, content, not
It's not
content.
kind of swinging up and
Yeah.
down, and yeah.
And that was shocking to me because for me, not feeling emotions was numbness. It wasn't being content. It was, I am so afraid of
You
what's going
either
on.
so you either feel them really intensely or not at all. Would I be right in saying that? Is that
Yeah.
what you're talking about? Yeah, okay, yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. I want to ask, and then we'll go,
Yeah.
this is my own little tangent here. But while you were talking, if people are aware of things like alexithymia and say for ADHD, there's problems with emotional regulation and stuff like that, how is BPD different? Do you know what I mean? Or does it have elements of things like alexithymia in it?
Yeah, no, it does. It is different. And I suppose this is the part where I will encourage people to take a look at the description to check for content notices and step away
Yeah,
if you need to.
yeah.
But the things that's really obvious for people to see is the emotion side of things. That takes up a lot, but there's also a lot of self-harm or impulsivity. And I mean self-harm. Self-harm for me looks like the classic TV type of self-harm, but it could
Mm,
be substance abuse or it could be being promiscuous in a way that doesn't actually align with what you want for your body, this type of way,
okay.
or
Um,
safe, that type of impulsivity in a way to harm yourself.
would that also include things like, compulsive shopping,
Yes.
spending uh, above your means and stuff like that? Okay.
Spending above your means. Yeah, there's a big loads of different ways it could be. And then there's also this fear of abandonment
Mm,
and it and the way that result could be in people. The most common one that you see on TV and everything is like people like threatening, like, oh my God, if you leave me, I'm going to do X and whatever. And some BPDers do feel that way. And that's it. Like the fear of abandonment is awful.
mm,
It's really deeply ingrained. Like I do the tiniest little thing, you're going to reject me as your friend, you're going to leave me, and this
mm.
type of way. So for some people, that means uh putting bargaining chips on relationships or constantly texting or um for
Is it
me,
a reassurance thing?
yeah, for
Yeah.
me though, when my fear of abandonment gets triggered, when I'm afraid
Mm,
um that somebody's going to leave me, I'm actually much more likely to shut down. Because it'd be safer for me. Like this is what the gremlins tell me. This is what those awful thoughts. But for
yeah.
my thought process is, oh well, it's safer if I decide to disengage from this relationship because then at least it's on my terms.
Yeah. So would that be defaulting back to the kind of numbness that you spoke about? Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
and the
yeah,
numbness is much more my default. I had to work a lot to get
the
to the
emotional side. Okay. And like as you mentioned, just to say to people that obviously what we're talking about, these topics that are in these talks are quite difficult. And it is okay to need a moment. It's okay to pause the video and come back. It's okay to pause the video and never come back. It's okay to step away. Like just mind yourself in these things, because while these are extremely important, they're extremely important topics and don't get talked about enough. We are very aware that they are difficult topics for people to talk about and difficult topics for people to listen to, even if it isn't a particular experience that you've had. It can be difficult and it can be hard for people to listen to. But again, if we don't talk about these things, where do people get an opportunity to learn? Where do people get an opportunity to perhaps identify something in themselves and go, oh, I'm not alone. There is, and then you can, when you know a thing, like we keep on saying about our education videos and stuff like that, when you have a name for something, then you can find support for something. So yeah, just to say, like, I really appreciate the work that you've done already with the other community members who've spoken, and I really appreciate you talking to me now about this, because obviously these aren't easy things for people to talk about, so I really appreciate it. So what's one thing that you really wish people understood about BPD? Because as I said, there is a lot of really bad negative impressions and information out there. So what's the thing you would really love people to know?
If I had to pick one singular thing, it's we're not villains purely because of our neurotype. I think that was the one thing that really struck me when I got like told I was a BPDer, is when I Googled books on BPD, they were all like how to survive a partner with BPD, how to recover when your parent has, this type of way. I had to go through about 15 books before I found one that wasn't about other people recovering from having a loved one with BPD. And obviously, like anybody, people can be abusive. But then that was my first interaction with it. It was so disheartening. And it just left me with a lot of, oh God, am I being awful to people? Am I, this type of way? And
yeah, concerns about, if I'm a parent, what's this going to mean for my child? Yeah, I could see how that could be very difficult. Yeah.
And I suppose one of the things, like the media and everything, and like any examples I know of BPD in TV and stuff, there's always really anger driven. And some BPDers do really struggle with anger. For me, my anger is much more self-directed. I actually really find it's only recently I've actually started expressing anger in a healthy, like in a I'm allowed to be angry about this situation, because anger was always one of those emotions I didn't allow myself access to. So then seeing every time I Googled just being met with all this abuse, it just, I just wish people knew that purely on a diagnosis, purely on a neurotype, neurodivergency, you're not a villain. You're not,
it isn't quid pro quo that, oh well, you're this, so you're, yeah, I can see what you're saying, that it's not a predestined path that people are on.
Yeah.
Okay. And so is BPD is it innate? Are people like, is it something that people are born with? Is it something that can develop later in life? Like, how do people recognize it in themselves, I suppose?
There's a few different theories, but the most agreed upon theory is that it develops from childhood trauma, and it develops in your late teens, early 20s. I suppose the problem per se that we have within the neurodivergent community, especially for those of us who were raised as girls, is there is a huge overlap in autistic traits and BPD traits. As a result, many people who were socialized as girls as a child, if they were not diagnosed as autistic as a child, when they seek out diagnosis, they then get given BPD diagnosis, even if that's not actually accurate diagnosis. And there is a big problem with diagnosis of BPD in autistic AFABs. But and I myself am autistic and had to fight for an autistic diagnosis, because they were like, oh well, you're BPD, so therefore, and I was like, yeah, no, but these issues stemmed from childhood. I can separate out the ones that are
Yeah.
from teenage years. And so that's it. It tends to develop in late teens. Could be a little bit earlier, but tends to be late teens, early 20s. And the leading theory is trauma in childhood, or particularly your emotions being dismissed in childhood, not being taught those healthy ways of regulating emotions. And so those,
Not being taught co-regulation or anything.
yeah, those lovely two combinations of trauma mixed in with bury your emotions allegedly produce BPD.
Yay. So how can people support somebody with BPD or somebody who's struggling?
I think obviously there is all those lovely the likes of Aware and all those different support groups and all this jazz, and like your local mental health team, all that stuff. Not that I have the best experience with those things, but I also do actually have the best experience. That was after a lot of fighting. But sorry. I think I wish so the way I like my the two people who support me the most in my life, the way they support me is they believe me when I say things. It might seem really dramatic to think that 1 minute I'm crying and the next minute I'm laughing, and therefore clearly I'm not actually upset. I am doing it for attention and everything. But those two people, they believe me, or when I have urges, they believe it, or none of these thoughts are, I know they might seem extreme looking inwards, but they feel so real in that moment. They are real to me in that moment. The thoughts are so consuming, the feelings are so consuming, and I think that is the most helpful thing for me, was having two people in my life who believe me regardless of what I say, because it's exhausting trying to defend yourself, or even if you're not defending yourself, feeling like you cannot say these things because people will think X, Y, and Z. So just being able to have that relief of, oh my God, guess what? I'm obsessing over Supernatural today. And then 2 minutes later being like, oh my God, I seriously, seriously want to give into this urge, and being able to verbalize them in a like consensual manner, of course, has been of the utmost importance for me.
Do you think there's enough, you mentioned mental health teams and Aware and people like that. Do you think there's enough awareness of BPD? I know we always talk about acceptance, but do you think there's actually enough awareness within people who are supposed to be this, the professional supports or whatever? Do you think there's enough awareness of BPD?
No, there is not. There is not. And it is an absolute pepper of mine. And within the Irish system itself, there is this constant debate about whether BPD even should count as a mental health condition. So we see some cases even in the courts where you are not eligible to do jury duty if you have BPD because you are seen as mentally unwell. However, also there has been different court rulings that says BPD do not qualify underneath the Mental Health Act. Therefore, we do
You're
not have the
competent.
same access and supports and protections as somebody with a different diagnosis, just because it's a personality difference. And that within itself. And then it's infuriating talking to doctors, talking to psychologists, all this jazz, who dismiss it, who don't have an idea. Or I spent years seeking help, going to people, going to people, going to doctors. I had been hospitalized several times because of self-harm and being told, oh, well, you're just a little bit depressed, you're just a little bit stressed, this type of way. The most recent influx of the mental health stuff just prior to getting diagnosed with BPD, literally told by the consultant, oh, well, if you're really suicidal, you would have done it already. And then it took me putting in a complaint with my service, your service, it took me forming a complaint against him, and all this jazz, because he had dismissed me and taken me off the service. And then like less than 2 weeks later, I got given a new psychologist, and they diagnosed me with BPD within like 2 meetings of me. And they're like, oh yeah, I don't know how people have missed this already, this type of way. And at this stage, I had already seen 8 different people. The lack of knowledge. And then even within that, the support system for people with BPD is not great. BPD is a lot of psychiatrists are of the opinion that BPD is drug resistant, and that meds will not help. And while there is no cure, or there is no, it can help with this certain symptoms like psychotic episodes or hallucinogenic episodes, all this jazz. But there is shame and stigma within the health teams to give people to prescribe people with anything if they have BPD. It's just I have felt, with the exception of one amazing psychologist, which I'm pretty sure all of my friends have gotten fed up with me talking about, but with the exception of him, there just seems to be this moral shame that is associated with BPD. Like, I could just be better if I chose to be, even within mental health teams.
Do you know what? And it's this, you just keep on hearing this. We just keep on hearing this from people, and blah, 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 being dismissed and being gaslit and being, or just do a bit of CBT and you'd be grand. It's like, no, you're not understanding that's not addressing what's going on. And why won't you listen to me and my lived experience? Why won't you actually listen to what I'm saying, not decide on your own? After, no, I know you're only over exaggerating, or you're only, like, I think they want people to go in when they're in the middle of something, like, and go in and be like, here, now do you believe me? And it must be extremely difficult to have to fight that corner, to have to educate people who are supposed to be supporting you all the time. It must be very exhausting.
It is. And I was lucky because I had the support of others to help me. And I'm even more lucky now that I know that I have even more support and I have more knowledge now to fight these things. Even at that, there is still some battles that I just don't even bother with, because they are too tiring. I am like, there's so many days that I'm literally fighting with myself to get out of bed, or I'm fighting with myself to drink or to just live. I don't want to have to fight the HSC as well. You
know what the sad thing is that's what they're relying on.
I know.
The system is so adversarial. It's so, sure, you're coping. They have no interest or inclination to make people thrive. And it's deliberately set up that you're just perceived as an annoyance. You're just an annoyance. I have 10 minutes for your appointment. And if you have anything more going on, sorry, I just can't be dealing with you, get out. Just before this turns into an absolute rant about health service in Ireland, because let's be honest, we could go another hour on that at least. What do you do to support? You've mentioned other people being supportive. You've mentioned having 2 people that listen to you and a huge support to you. What do you do to support yourself?
I suppose I've done a hell of a lot of therapy. Um, I done the CBT, hated it, felt broken after it. Um, done DBT. I felt a lot more secure in myself after doing dialectical behavior therapy.
Mm.
I know we're generally against behavioralism, but there is a difference when you're a consenting adult.
Hmm.
Um, and I also adjusted quite a bit of it. That was the main thing that I done to help me. I
Mm.
I stopped shaming myself over adjustments I had to make. Um,
Yeah.
so even within the DBT, there is this like there was this reward system of like if you did not self-harm for a week, you should reward yourself. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm not engaging in that part of it. Like if I want chocolate, I'm gonna have a I've I fought hard enough today. I'm going to eat my bar of chocolate. I'm not going to wait until I'm a week without self-harm before I eat my bar of chocolate, you know, this type of way.
There's
Um,
your autistic. That rule doesn't make sense. I'm not doing it.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
kicking
exactly.
it.
And like I can't visualize things. So when we were doing the mindfulness stuff, I was
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I'm gonna find another way of engaging in this, you know, this type of
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And even just my day-to-day life, um, not beating myself up because I'm crying at some sad ad about dogs needing to be adopted. Um,
You have to
you
have a
know,
heart of stone. Yeah.
yeah. So like just that, being kinder with myself. And I know that sounds so stereotypical, like just be kinder to
No,
yourself.
but the
But
thing
it's
is, it's
so
it's very
hard.
true. It's very true. Like, do you know what I mean? Like for me, finding out about my different neurodivergences, it was a kind of a letting go of a, oh, I don't have to be that voice on my shoulder giving out to myself the whole time. Like, do I still get frustrated when I do some sort of really ADHD thing and have to pay ADHD tax because I haven't sent something back or haven't, filled in a form? Or, yeah, of course I get annoyed at myself, but I'm not berating myself. And I think that's the difference. You can get frustrated with the way your brain works sometimes. I think everybody can. And you're like, oh God, it'd be lovely to walk upstairs and remember why I've walked upstairs. But the not that extra bit where you were then really hard on yourself and really saying the words to yourself that other people have said to you all your life, becoming your own bully, basically.
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing. So even though it sounds a bit positive mental attitude, I don't think it is. It's a
No.
really important thing to be kind to yourself.
And look, even like we're saying positive mental health should sometimes that's me being kind to myself is allowing myself to have a strong
Yeah.
if I miss a concert because I'm too anxious, like I'm literally too anxious to leave the house, blaring my music and being like, screw you. How dare
Yeah.
you be like this? That's not fair. And doing the childhood tantrum, stomping my foot, screaming to my music that I
Mm,
wasn't allowed to do as a child. And now I'm sort of embracing that instead of shaming myself and being like, oh my God, no, you're not allowed to feel disappointed. You decided not to go. You were the one that,
mm,
this type of way.
yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, like it's being kind to myself, it's accepting what's going on in my brain, but that doesn't mean making things happy. That's just
Yeah.
accepting my reality, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Well, it makes sense to me. And that's all I care about right now. Yeah. So is there anything else that you'd like to say before we finish up about BPD or mental health neurodivergences or anything like that?
I suppose the only thing I will say, not the only thing I will say, the thing I will say in this moment, because if any of you ever get me talking about mental health, you'd be going for but in the neurodivergent community, I love our little community. I love this community we have developed in Ireland, not just with Neuro Pride, but with other groups
Mm,
like DWI and DPI and all these lovely disabled groups, but also the autistic groups and the ADHD groups and all these lovely neurodivergent communities in Ireland and abroad and whatever, but particularly in Ireland, obviously, I'm going to feel that bit more connected. I hope that we get to a point where we're just as accepting of the mental health neurodivergencies as we are of the likes of autism and ADHD. And that goes for the wider society as well. I'm so fed up seeing places being like, oh, we're neurodivergent friendly, and what they mean is they're autistic or ADHD.
Neurodiversity friendly, don't be silly.
Oh, sorry, yes, you're true. And just even like in the school systems and everything, and it's like, oh yeah, you're totally fine with autistic children, you're totally fine with ADHD children. You're not okay with the parent who has a panic attack, this type of way, or so like it is
while absolutely accepting that they'll say they're okay with autistic and ADHD and dyspraxia and dyslexia, and not quite being there.
Oh yeah,
but I understand what you're saying. It's like, as long as your thing isn't actually affecting me and isn't making me feel uncomfortable or making me feel, then yeah, I'll be accepting. But yeah, and I would agree with you.
Yeah,
wider society is very much a big work in progress. But within our community, within the neurodivergent community, there's a lot of work to be done. We still see demonization. We still see the same nonsense that is out in the wider society being brought to ours, and the same lack of education and the same lack of knowledge. If you don't know, don't speak to things you don't know.
Yeah.
Don't demonize an entire group of people based on a neurotype. Do the work.
Yeah.
Educate yourself.
And look, I do understand that a lot of the rejection. So I'm going to talk about autistic groups for a moment, because I'm not in ADHD groups. I'm not an ADHDer. But I do understand a lot of the rejection around BPDers and stuff in autistic groups is because so many people were diagnosed as BPD originally and knew that diagnosis wasn't actually what was going on for them.
Yeah.
But what happens then, I find, is because that wasn't their lived experience, they reject those of us who do have BPD.
Or dismiss it.
We can't possibly, we just aren't accepting our autistic diagnosis. I 100% accept my autistic diagnosis. I was calling myself autistic before I had an autistic diagnosis. I set up Autistic Book Club before I had an autistic diagnosis. But I know in myself the days where my BPD is more present versus my autism is more present. I know when I am hyper focused on something because it is a special interest versus when I'm hyper focusing because it is an escape mechanism. And not from an autistic, but from a BPD, I can't cope with the reality of this world. I need to escape right now. So, but there is a dismissal of the BPD community and the wider mental health community, and especially cluster Bs and narcissistic personality and schizophrenic personality, all those personalities differences. There is such a rejection of them, and I get it. I understand that for a lot of people it comes from being misdiagnosed themselves. But that shouldn't mean that we get pushed out, this type of way. So yes, if I can ask of anything from the neurodivergent community, it is to start accepting and embracing this wonderful umbrella of neurodivergence, and that includes the mental health, the MAD diagnosis. But yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. And there you go. There's your autistic side doing that. I've just explained something perfectly and then finish it up, but I hope that makes sense. I saw a meme yesterday about that exact topic of my autistic or ADHD friend gives a very coherent, very, I can't remember, I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember the exact words, coherent, detailed, in-depth, researched mini speech on something, then goes at the end, I hope that makes sense. And I've copped that we all do it, but I think that's a lived experience. We spend a lot of our life being told, what are you talking about? That doesn't make sense. So, but yes, I just thought it was funny that I literally just read that meme yesterday and then you finished up, but I hope that makes sense. Thank you so much, Keir. I really genuinely thank you so much, because this topic is a topic I know that is very close and dear to your heart, and a topic that, but again, you are giving of yourself by talking about it. So yes, thank you very much. And yeah, I hope people will check out the other videos if they haven't already. They're really, really interesting. Some really, really interesting topics and really fascinating speakers, really just very, very interesting. So if you get a chance, please do check them out. They're very, very enjoyable. Thank you very much.
Thank you.